Hello, my name's Дейвид Сквайерс and I'm a football cartoonist. I work for the Gardien in the UK, Gardien in Australia, and also L'Ekip in France and Elf Freund in Germany. The weekly cartoons, I don't so much look at the matches themselves. I prefer to kind of look under the rock of football and look at the ants crawling around and look at some of the corruption and some of the darker stuff that goes on. But the main thing is I try to make them funny, and I look at the characters in football, the egos, just some of the crazy stuff that goes on, and I try to present that in the cartoon form to the readers. I do, like I say, one a week for the Guardian and Guardian Australia. And what that means is I watch a lot of football, as you can imagine. I read a lot of newspapers, and I just scribble notes the whole time. And then on a Monday morning, I sit down with a big coffee and just plan the week out and get to work. So that's my life, drawing cartoons and watching football.
What are your favorite characters in Australian football?
Yeah, okay. There's probably three main ones who come up fairly frequently. The first would be Tim Cahill, who everyone in Russia would or might know. He's been a great player for Australia. He's Australia's all-time highest goal scorer, but he also has an enormous ego, and he isn't shy about doing commercial activities, whereas often in Australia that kind of thing is sometimes frowned upon, or people aren't as sort of open about it. But Tim is very keen to do that kind of thing. So he often crops up in the cartoons. I think he's seen some of them because he followed me on Twitter for about a day, and then he really quickly unfollowed me. So I think he went and looked at some of the cartoons and thought, okay, that's what he's about. No, thank you. So he would be the first one. The second would probably be the people who run Football Federation Australia. So they are not a popular organisation in Australia. They're seen as being kind of wasteful and not really understanding the game. Some of the criticism against them is a bit harsh, but I have fun with two of the main characters. He's very sort of straight-laced guys with suits and ties, and I'll always try to put them in amusing situations, and I can have fun with that. And the third one would probably be a player who no one in Russia has heard of. Sorry. The third one would be a player that no one in Russia has heard of, but I really hope that they get the opportunity to, because I hope he goes to the World Cup. And there's a player called Matt Simon, who is someone who doesn't look like a footballer, he doesn't play like a footballer. I think he might even have won a competition. I'm not sure what he's doing there, but he has the biggest heart of any footballer you've ever seen. He will run all day, and he will put his head in positions that physically impossible. And he's recently scored his first 2 goals in about 18 months. He very rarely scores, but he's on a red hot streak of form, so he has to get on the plane to Russia. World football, so each week I do a cartoon about the Premier League, so a lot of stuff is focused there. Jose Mourinho is someone who comes up in the cartoons very often. I really like drawing cartoons about people with big egos, and no one has a bigger ego than Jose. Similarly, Cristiano Ronaldo. He's one of the players who I can draw from memory. Often I need to refer to the image when I'm drawing the player, but Cristiano I can draw on a beer mat, you know. Also in England, Arsene Wenger. He is someone who seems very, like, he's so uptight, but he's always seems to be on the verge of exploding. And sometimes he does explode, and he throws a water bottle or, you know, kicks something. And those are probably the three that really stick out. Yeah. So I've written a couple of books, and so in my last book, I looked at some of my favourite players in history, and Lev Yashin was one of those players who just an amazing life story. and so I've done a cartoon about him. And actually, in my first book, I did a cartoon about Russia winning the first European Championships. So I've done a couple. Obviously, with the World Cup coming up, I've done a few in preparation for that, and I'm really looking forward to spending 6 weeks writing about it all.
What do you think Australians are expecting from this World Cup?
I think the expectations for the team are, I think it's more hope than expectation. I think they realise they're in a tough group. If they can get a good result against Denmark in the second game, then they have a chance of getting out the group. But they start against France, which is incredibly difficult. They've got a new coach who's only seen the team play twice, and he has to pick his squad. So I don't think there are many Australians who expect Australia to win the World Cup or even get to the latter stages. But the beauty about following the Socceruz is that you're not weighed down by the expectation. That doesn't spoil your enjoyment. People who are spending money to go to Russia are going there to experience the culture, they're going there to meet people, they're going there to have fun. And sure, they want their team to do well more than anything, but it won't ruin their time if they don't. So I'm English. You might not be able to tell from the accent, but I'm English. I've been in Australia since 2009, and the experience of supporting the Socceroos is very different from supporting England. England are weighed down by that weight of expectation, and England fans don't enjoy the football. There's too much pressure, and that's not something that Australian fans experience, so they'll have fun. I think with any team support, you obviously get the whole breadth of every walk of life, and it's probably the same with the Socceroos. The first Socceroos game I watched was actually in London. They were playing Ghana in a friendly at Queen's Park Rangers, and I was sat with the Australian fans, and I've never sat with a more drunk group in my life. The stadium holds about 14,000, I would guess 10,000 of them were Australians, and they were all drunk. But the thing is, the stadiums in England don't sell alcohol. So how and why this happened, I don't know. But generally, I think that was because that was in London, and it was mostly backpackers and tourists. I've been to games in Australia, obviously. I've been to see Australia play at home, and the crowd is more sedate. They're more reactive. I think that's something that's true of many national team fans. You don't have the same sort of partisan, you don't have the same kind of passion that you do for your club side. You only really think about your national team maybe once every 4 months when they play, and once every 4 years or 2 years when it really matters. So the thing about Australians is that they're great travellers. So you know when they get to Russia, they're going to be friendly, they're going to be fun. They might drink all the bars empty, so that might not be so popular. But they're essentially a good bunch. They're people you'd be happy to invite into your house, lock the drinks cabinet, and ask them to leave. But yeah, they're a good bunch.
Do you see any difference in the way the World Cup in Russia is portrayed by the English media and the Australian media?
The sports media in Australia are generally more positive and probably more excited about it. I think that the English sports media, obviously at the moment, there's political tension between England and Russia, and I think that's probably expressed in the sports writing. In some of my cartoons, obviously I'm a satirical cartoonist, so I will touch on some of that as well. But really, the issue that sports writers and I think most people have is with politicians, not with the people. And I try to reflect that in my cartoons as well. A lot of a lot of the work that I do when I'm writing about FIFA or about politics is about abuse of power and corruption. So obviously there are some themes there with anything to do with a competition that FIFA runs. I'll probably make some jokes about that. But generally I feel that the Australian media is probably more positive about the World Cup than the British media at the moment.
So what does the Australian and British media think of the chances of the Russian team?
Chances of the Russian team? Haven't seen much analysis of it in Australia yet. It might be a little bit too early to get into that sort of that group by group analysis, but as soon as the draw was made, everyone said that that's a good draw for Russia. I think since Mo Salah has started scoring more goals for Liverpool, Egypt looked more of a threat. But I think generally people expect Russia to at least get out of the group. Like, the home advantage is going to be huge for them. There's probably not as many household names in the Russian team as in previous years. So in England, I suppose Akinfeev is the one that we're most familiar with. I don't think there's any Russians currently in the Premier League, whereas before there was always Arshavin. Unfortunately, he left English football before I got a chance to draw him because he had a perfectly round face and he would have been nice to draw, and he was a fashion student as well. There's lots going on there. I regret that I never got to draw him. So if you could get him out of retirement, that would be great. So a couple of years ago I had my first book published, The Illustrated History of Football, featuring Lev Yashin on the front, of course. And there's a cartoon inside also about Russia or the Soviet Union winning the first European football championships. There's Lev again. There's someone throwing his stomach ulcer medicine away. So yeah, and this book will soon be translated into Russia and on sale in Russia. I had a really nice experience working with the translator who he sent me a lovely email saying, "I've got the job of translating your book. Can you explain a few of the jokes to me?" And I said, "Please send them through." And then he sent me an email which was like the Great Wall of China. It was amazing. So I've explained all the jokes. So Russian readers, you have no excuses not to laugh until you die when you read this book.